The planet was silent, covered in endless ruins that stretched across dry mountains and empty valleys. Long ago it had been alive with voices, but now only wind moved through the stone walls. The monastery stood in the center of a broken city, its tall towers cracked and its gates fallen. No one had entered for centuries, for travelers feared the tales of a cursed manuscript hidden within. Tomasz walked carefully through the crumbled entrance. His boots pressed against dust that had not been touched for generations. His small lamp cut through the shadows, showing faded paintings on the walls. He was an explorer, but not just for gold or treasure. He searched for secrets that history had forgotten. Every ruin he stepped into filled him with a strange sense of duty. He believed humanity could grow stronger only by remembering its past. Behind him, the quiet sound of steps echoed. Myra followed close, holding a scanner in her hand. She was a historian, one who valued records and truth over rumors. While Tomasz searched for adventure, Myra searched for meaning. She warned him many times about the legends of this monastery, but Tomasz only smiled. The air was heavy inside. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Broken statues lined the hall, their faces eroded by time. They looked like monks in robes, standing in silence as if they still guarded the place. Myra shivered as her eyes moved across their stone faces. At the end of the hall, Tomasz found a massive door. It was made of black stone, sealed with strange markings that glowed faintly when his lamp passed over them. Dust filled every crack, but the symbols still looked alive. He ran his hand across the surface, and the door trembled slightly as if it recognized him. "This must be it," Tomasz whispered. Myra shook her head. "If the stories are true, then behind this door lies the book that destroyed whole villages. We should not open it." Tomasz smiled. "Stories are told to frighten people. If no one seeks the truth, humanity will stay blind. What if this book holds knowledge we need?" Her scanner beeped softly, showing unusual energy within the chamber. She stepped back nervously. "Energy is moving inside, Tomasz. It should not be active after so many centuries. This is dangerous." But Tomasz was already setting down his pack. He pulled out a small tool and pressed it against the stone lock. Sparks flashed, and the markings glowed brighter. The ground shook as the door slowly opened. Dust poured out, and for a moment the chamber beyond was hidden in a storm of gray air. When it cleared, the explorers stepped inside. The room was round, with walls covered in faded paintings of stars and ships. In the middle stood a pedestal of black marble, and on it rested the manuscript. It was not a simple book. Its cover was bound in some kind of metal that shimmered like silver yet seemed too strong to bend. Symbols ran across its surface, shifting as if alive. The edges of the pages glowed faintly, and a soft hum filled the chamber. Myra's heart raced. She felt her breath shorten. "It is real," she whispered. "The Book of Doom." The monks locked it away because no mind could survive its words. Tomasz stepped forward. His eyes were fixed on the manuscript. For him, it was not doom but discovery. He reached out and felt the cold metal surface. His hand trembled, not from fear but from awe. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Myra shook her head. "Hear what?" "The whispers," Tomasz said softly. "Like voices calling from far away. They want to be heard." Myra pulled him back. "Stop. If you read even a single line, you may lose your mind. That is what the records say. People saw visions they could not escape. Some wandered into the desert and never returned. Others turned against their own families. This book is not a gift, it is a curse. But Tomasz kept his gaze on the manuscript. Or perhaps they were not strong enough. Maybe they feared what they did not understand. Humanity has always grown by facing fear. If this book holds knowledge from before our time, we cannot turn away. Myra lowered her head. She knew Tomasz well. Once he decided, nothing could stop him. Yet she also felt the pull of the manuscript. Even standing near it, she sensed something stirring in her thoughts, as if new ideas were forming on their own. She wondered if the book was already reaching into their minds. The chamber grew colder. The hum grew louder. Tomasz lifted the manuscript carefully from the pedestal. The symbols on the cover shifted once more, glowing brighter than before. The monks who had locked it away had failed, for now the book was in human hands again. Myra looked at Tomasz with fear and wonder. She knew their journey had changed forever. What they carried was more than a book. It was a key to something vast, something dangerous, and something powerful. And as the door of the chamber closed behind them with a heavy echo, the monastery returned to silence. The curse had been awakened. The ship floated in the darkness of space, its engines silent as it drifted away from the ruined monastery. Inside, the air was tense. Tomasz sat at a small table in the control room with the manuscript before him. The strange metal cover shimmered under the dim lights, glowing faintly as if alive. He had carried many relics in his travels, but nothing had ever felt like this. Myra stood across from him, her arms crossed tightly. Her eyes were fixed on the book, but she did not move closer. She wanted to lock it away, maybe even throw it into the void of space, but Tomasz would not allow that. "We should not keep it here," she said firmly. "The records warned us. People who saw this book were changed forever. Their minds broke. Entire villages fell into chaos because of it. Do you want the same thing to happen to us?" Tomasz did not look away from the manuscript. His hand rested gently on its surface, and he felt the faint vibration, like a quiet heartbeat. "What if those stories are wrong?" he replied. "What if they only saw fear instead of truth? Maybe the book is not a curse. Maybe it is a message." Myra shook her head. "A message that drives people mad is no gift. It is poison. Tomasz, you must see reason." He finally looked up at her. His eyes were calm but full of determination. "Reason is why I cannot let it go. Humanity is small. We are scattered across the stars, building colonies, fighting for scraps of knowledge. If this book carries wisdom from those who came before, then it could change everything. Imagine what we could learn. We could be stronger." Myra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And if it consumes us before we can learn anything, then it is only death. We are not the first to touch it. Others tried and failed. What makes you think we are different?" For a moment, silence filled the room except for the low hum of the ship. Tomasz glanced back at the manuscript. Strange symbols ran along the edges, shifting when the light struck them. He felt as though the book was waiting, listening to their words. He sighed. "I cannot explain it. I only know that it calls to me. When I touched it, I heard voices. Not madness, Myra. Not wild screams. It was clear. They were speaking to me, asking me to listen. I believe it wants to share something." Myra's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, but part of her feared that Tomasz was right. Even now, while she stood far from the table, she felt thoughts racing in her mind. Images of stars, machines, and long-forgotten cities flashed in her head like quick sparks. She pushed them away, but they returned each time she looked at the book. She turned sharply and walked to the small window, staring out at the endless dark of space. Tomasz, promise me one thing. Do not open it. Keep it closed until we know more. If you open those pages, there may be no return. Tomasz leaned back in his chair. His hand left the manuscript, but his eyes never left it. I promise to wait, he said slowly. But I will not promise to leave it closed forever. That choice is too important. Myra clenched her fists. She knew it was the most she could get from him. She turned back and forced herself to sit down across from him. The glow of the book lit both their faces. Hours passed. The ship drifted quietly between stars, guided by its auto systems. Tomasz read old notes from his tablet, trying to match the symbols on the cover with known languages. Myra checked records stored in her scanner. She searched for every mention of the monastery and its curse. The more she read, the more fear grew in her heart. The records told of a village that once found a copy of the manuscript. At first the people were excited, speaking of visions and knowledge. But soon they lost touch with reality. They built strange towers, carved symbols into the ground, and then vanished without a trace. Another story spoke of a monk who tried to translate the book. He wrote endless pages before tearing them apart with his own hands. No one ever found him again. Myra closed her scanner and pressed her head into her hands. She whispered, "Why did we ever open that door?" Tomasz looked at her, his expression softer now. He stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because if we had not, someone else would. And maybe they would not have cared for the truth as we do. At least with us, the book has a chance to be understood." Myra looked up at him, her eyes full of worry. "Or to destroy us," she said quietly. The manuscript hummed louder for a brief moment, as if responding to their words. The lights in the room flickered. Both Tomasz and Myra froze. Then silence returned. They exchanged a long look. Neither spoke, but both knew something had changed. The book was not just resting on the table. It was awake, and it was listening. The stars outside the ship stretched like silver dust across the black sea of space. Tomasz sat near the table once more, the manuscript resting before him like a silent guardian. He had not opened it yet, though the urge pressed against his mind with every passing moment. Myra sat across from him, studying the shifting glow on the book's surface. For days, they had argued in whispers and uneasy silence. Tomasz wanted to see what lay within. Myra wanted to keep it sealed. But on this night, the choice was taken from them. Without warning, the manuscript trembled. Its cover unlocked with a sharp sound, as if invisible chains had snapped apart. Both explorers froze as the symbols along the edges shone brighter than ever. Slowly, the book began to open by itself. Myra's breath caught in her throat. "Tomasz, step back. Do not look." But Tomasz leaned forward, his eyes wide with awe. The first page lifted into view. Instead of written words, the surface showed glowing patterns, like stars painted in light. The lines twisted and formed shapes, linking into maps that filled the room with shifting colors. Myra gasped despite herself. She recognized the patterns at once. They were not random drawings. They were maps of the galaxy. Not the galaxy as it was now, but as it had been long ago. She could see stars that no longer burned, colonies that had been forgotten, and paths that stretched across the universe like veins of fire. Tomasz whispered, "It is not madness. It is memory. Whoever wrote this book wanted us to see. The room grew brighter as the pages turned. Each page carried more images, giant ships with wings of light, machines larger than mountains, and cities built on floating worlds. They looked real, not like stories. It was as if the book held windows into the past, showing a time when humans had ruled the stars. Myra stepped closer, her fear battling with her curiosity. Her historian's mind burned with questions. She placed her hand over the glowing patterns, and the lines shifted under her touch, moving like water. The map changed, focusing on a distant cluster of stars she had never seen before. Her voice shook. Tomasz, these are coordinates. This is not just history. It is a guide. Tomasz stared at her with wonder. A guide to what? Before Myra could answer, the book shifted again. The symbols bent into new shapes, and words began to form in a language neither of them knew. Yet when Tomasz looked at them, he could read them as if he had always known their meaning. His lips moved silently as he read, and Myra felt a chill. What do they say? She asked. Tomasz blinked, his voice low. They speak of a power hidden in the stars. A legacy left for us. It says humanity has forgotten who we are, but this book will awaken us again. Myra stepped back, shaking her head. No, Tomasz. That is how the madness begins. You hear words that were never there. You believe things that cannot be true. That is how the stories began. But Tomasz's eyes were bright, filled with a fire she had never seen before. It is not madness. I understand them clearly. This book is speaking to me. It is telling us where to go. Myra wanted to argue, but even she could not deny what she saw. The coordinates glowed on the page like burning stars, pulling her mind toward them. She felt dizzy, almost as if the book were pushing thoughts into her head. She shook it off and forced herself to step away. Suddenly, the ship's alarm rang out. Lights flashed red, and the hum of the engines faltered. Myra rushed to the controls, her hands flying over the panels. Something is draining our power, she shouted. Tomasz snapped the book shut, and at once the alarms grew quiet. The lights steadied, and the ship hummed back to life. Both stood in silence, breathing hard. Myra turned to him with fierce eyes. You see. The book is dangerous. It is not just memory. It reaches into our ship, into us. We cannot trust it. Tomasz held the manuscript close to his chest. Or it is trying to guide us. It showed us the stars, Myra. It gave us coordinates. That cannot be an accident. We are meant to follow. Myra pressed her palms against the console, trying to steady herself. She wanted to deny him, to throw the book out into the endless dark. But even as she thought of it, the coordinates glowed in her mind, bright and steady like a flame. She could not unsee them. In the silence that followed, both knew their path had changed. The manuscript had chosen to reveal itself, and now the choice before them was no longer simple. They could ignore it, but the memory of those maps and those stars would burn inside them forever. Myra whispered, almost to herself, what if this is how it begins? What if this is how we lose ourselves? Tomasz placed a hand on her shoulder. His voice was steady, filled with hope. Or what if this is how we rise again? The book rested between them, glowing faintly as if it understood. The first glimpse had been given, and nothing would ever be the same. The ship moved through the silent sea of stars. Its engines glowed faintly as it carried Tomasz, Myra, and the crew across deep space. In the common room, the cursed manuscript rested inside a sealed case, but even closed, it gave off a faint hum. No one could escape its presence. At first, the crew had thought it was only an old book. They laughed when Tomasz carried it aboard, saying it looked like nothing more than a forgotten relic. But soon the laughter stopped. One night, a worker named Ryan woke screaming from his sleep. He spoke of voices calling his name from the void. His eyes were wide, and his body shook. Myra tried to calm him, saying it was only a dream, but he swore he saw strange machines moving among the stars, machines that were alive. The next day, another crew member, Laura, began to speak in a language no one understood. Her words rolled off her tongue with perfect rhythm, but they were not human words. She wrote symbols across the walls of her cabin, symbols that looked like the ones on the manuscript's cover. When asked where she had learned them, she only smiled faintly and said, "I just know." Myra grew afraid. She moved the manuscript to a locked chamber deep inside the ship, hoping distance would weaken its hold. But even there, the humming continued, and the crew whispered of dreams and visions. She confronted Tomasz in the control room. "This is the curse I warned you about. It is spreading through us. Soon the whole ship will fall into madness." Tomasz looked tired, but his eyes still burned with determination. "It is not madness, Myra. It is knowledge. They are seeing what was hidden. Do you not see the pattern?" Ryan spoke of machines that bend space. Laura speaks the old language. These are not curses. These are gifts. Myra slammed her hand against the table. Gifts that tear the mind apart. Tomasz, they cannot sleep. They cannot think straight. If this continues, we will lose control of the crew. Her words were true. Already, tension grew among them. Some begged to throw the book into the nearest star, believing it to be a tool of ruin. Others gathered around Tomasz, whispering that he was chosen to lead them to a new age. The ship began to split into two groups, one ruled by fear and one ruled by hope. Late one night, Myra walked past the crew quarters and heard soft chanting. She looked in and saw three workers kneeling on the floor, their hands raised toward the locked chamber that held the book. They chanted in the same unknown language that Laura had spoken, their voices rising in strange harmony. Their eyes were closed, but tears ran down their faces. Myra pulled them away, shouting at them to stop. But when they opened their eyes, she saw a glow in them, faint but unnatural. They whispered, "The book is calling. It wants to be read." Myra felt fear strike her heart. She ran to Tomasz and begged him again. "We cannot keep it. We are losing the crew. If we carry it further, there will be nothing left of us." Tomasz listened, his jaw tight. "I hear your warning, Myra. But I also hear the truth. Do you not understand? Humanity has been small for too long. We live in scattered colonies, afraid of the dark. But this book shows us our past. It shows us that we once ruled the stars. We cannot throw that away because of fear." Myra's eyes filled with frustration. "And what if it destroys us before we reach that future?" Tomasz looked out the window at the endless black sky. "Then at least we tried to rise again." The days grew heavier. Ryan stopped eating, staring for hours at the walls as if listening to voices only he could hear. Laura wrote long passages in the unknown tongue, filling pages with strange warnings and promises. Some crew followed her, saying her words carried truth. Myra felt the ship slipping away. She recorded notes each night, her voice trembling as she spoke into her scanner. The manuscript is not silent. Even locked, it whispers. The crew changes each day. I fear soon they will not follow orders. I must find a way to control this, before it is too late. But in her quiet moments, even Myra felt the pull. Dreams filled her sleep. She saw ships with wings of fire soaring between stars. She saw men and women standing proud on worlds unknown, holding banners that glowed with human symbols. Sometimes she woke with tears, her chest heavy with longing. She began to wonder if Tomasz was right. Perhaps the book was not only a curse. Perhaps it was opening doors inside their minds that had been locked for centuries. Still, fear held her heart, for the line between knowledge and madness was too thin to see. One evening, the ship passed through a quiet region of space, and the stars outside the window shifted. Myra felt a sudden weight in her head, a vision pressing against her eyes. She saw a world of stone towers floating above a burning sun. She heard a voice whisper, "Come, awaken what was lost." When she opened her eyes, Tomasz was already there, looking at her with knowing eyes. He asked softly, "You saw it too, did you not?" Myra could not answer. Her silence was enough. The manuscript hummed louder that night, as if pleased. Its power was spreading, and soon no one on the ship would be free from its touch. The ship floated in silence, but inside, voices filled the halls. Some crew prayed to the manuscript, some feared it, and some refused to speak at all. The air grew heavy, not from lack of oxygen, but from the weight of thoughts pressing against every mind. Myra sat in her cabin with the book open before her. She had locked the door, fearing the crew would see her, but she could no longer resist. The pages glowed with living light, the symbols shifting like flowing rivers. At first she had been afraid, but slowly her fear had changed into burning curiosity. Her eyes followed the patterns. The pages told a story, not in words, but in visions. She saw great ships moving across the stars, led by humans with knowledge beyond imagining. They built towers that reached into the skies of 100 worlds. They spoke to the stars themselves, bending them with machines of power. But then she saw darkness. A vast enemy had risen against them, an enemy not of flesh but of cold machines. The war had torn the skies apart, breaking the proud empire of humanity. Worlds were lost, and cities turned into ash. Humanity had fallen back into shadows. Myra's hands shook as she touched the glowing lines. The book was not made by monks, nor by strangers. It was written by humans of the forgotten empire. They had locked their history into the manuscript, not as a curse, but as a warning. The humming grew louder as the pages shifted to the next vision. Myra saw the monks who had hidden the book centuries later. They had been too afraid to understand it. The visions broke their minds, so they called it cursed. They did not see that it carried the truth. Tears filled Myra's eyes. For the first time, she felt the full weight of what she had found. It was never madness, she whispered. It was memory. Her door opened with a soft hiss. She turned quickly and saw Tomasz standing there. His eyes were tired but steady. He had known she would open it. "You see it now," he said. "The truth. We were greater once. We were rulers of the stars. And this book is the voice of our ancestors." Myra stood, her hands trembling. "Yes, I see. But Tomasz, it also shows why they fell. They warn us. If we take their path without care, we will repeat their end. The book is not only knowledge. It is also a burden." Tomasz walked closer, his gaze fixed on the glowing pages. "Every burden is worth carrying if it leads us forward. Myra, do you not understand? We have always thought humanity began small, reaching slowly into space. But no, we are the children of giants. Their blood is in us. This book proves it. Myra tried to steady her breath. But can we survive it? The crew is already breaking. Ryan barely speaks. Laura writes in a language no one taught her. They are pieces of this memory, but they cannot control it. Tomasz nodded slowly. Yes, some are not strong enough. But maybe that is the test. The book seeks those who can endure, those who can rise. The weak will fall away, but the strong will carry humanity forward. His words chilled Myra, yet part of her agreed. The visions had changed her, given her knowledge she had never imagined. Already she could recall symbols and maps with perfect clarity. The book had planted them in her mind, and they felt as natural as her own thoughts. Later that night, Myra and Tomasz gathered the crew. The book lay open on the table, glowing bright enough to fill the room with golden light. Some crew stepped back in fear, shielding their eyes. Others leaned forward in wonder, eager to hear. Myra spoke first, her voice steady but heavy with truth. This manuscript is not the curse the monks claimed. It is a record, written by humans who came before us. They ruled the stars, but they fell to an enemy of great power. They left this behind as a warning, so we would not forget. Murmurs filled the room. Some shook their heads, refusing to believe. Others nodded, their faces filled with awe. Tomasz raised his hand for silence. You feel it inside you. The dreams, the visions, the voices. That is not madness. That is memory. Our ancestors are speaking to us through this book. They want us to rise again. One worker stepped forward, fear in his eyes. But if they fell, how can we hope to stand? What if this path only leads to ruin? Tomasz answered without hesitation. Because they left us this. They believed someone, someday, would be strong enough to carry their knowledge. That someone is us. The crew fell into silence. The glow of the book filled their faces, showing doubt, fear, and hope. Myra looked around the room and saw the change. Whether they wished it or not, the manuscript had planted its seed in every heart. None of them could turn away now. When the meeting ended, Myra stood by the window of the ship, watching the endless sea of stars. She felt both heavy and light, burdened and awakened. The revelation was clear: humanity was not young and weak. Humanity was ancient, powerful, and waiting to rise again. But the warning still echoed in her thoughts. They had fallen once before. If they did not choose wisely, they would fall again. The book glowed softly in the chamber, waiting for its next reader. The ship glided closer to the star system marked in the manuscript. Outside the windows, the stars formed unfamiliar patterns, constellations that neither Tomasz nor Myra had ever seen. The coordinates from the book were exact, guiding them to a cluster of dead worlds and drifting metal ruins. The crew moved in tense silence, each member aware that something extraordinary awaited them. Inside, the manuscript glowed brighter than ever. It lay on the central table, casting golden light that seemed to pull the room into its rhythm. Myra watched Tomasz carefully. She knew his determination had grown stronger each day, fed by the knowledge the book offered. She feared for him, and for herself, and for the crew who were already showing signs of strain. The first signs of the trial began when the ship entered the system. Lights flickered along the walls as strange energy rippled through the hull. Crew members who had not yet fallen into visions began to feel pressure in their minds, as if the stars themselves whispered secrets meant only for those willing to listen. Some clutched their heads, groaning softly. Others stared in awe, their eyes reflecting the patterns glowing in the manuscript. Ryan, the worker who had first succumbed to visions, wandered into the control room. His eyes were wide, and his voice shook as he spoke. The stars, they are not just stars. They are doors. We can walk through them if we dare. Myra rushed to him, steadying his trembling hands. Do not speak in riddles. Focus. You must stay grounded. Tomasz stepped forward calmly. Let him speak, Myra. He is seeing what we all must see. This is the trial the book promised. Only by facing it can we understand the knowledge hidden for centuries. The crew gathered in the main chamber, hesitant but drawn by the glow of the manuscript. Laura sat on the floor, writing symbols rapidly, her hands moving as if guided by an unseen force. The patterns twisted and curved across the pages, echoing the shapes that now appeared in the stars outside the ship. Myra felt a wave of fear. Tomasz, it is too much. The crew cannot endure this. If we push further, minds will break. We will lose control of the ship entirely. Tomasz's expression softened. I understand your fear, Myra. But we cannot stop now. The book brought us here for a reason. It is not merely showing visions. It is leading us to the legacy of our ancestors. If we turn back, we will remain blind to what we are capable of. The ship drifted into the center of the system. There, floating like the remains of a forgotten world, were enormous machines. Some were larger than mountains, others shaped like towers with wings of metal. They were inactive, yet energy pulsed faintly within them. Tomasz gasped, leaning over the manuscript. They are the guardians, he whispered. Our ancestors built these. They were meant to be awakened only by those worthy of knowledge. Myra approached cautiously, her fear mixed with awe. And what happens if we are not worthy? Tomasz did not answer immediately. He studied the glowing patterns on the pages, then looked back at the crew. Then we fail the trial. The book will withdraw its knowledge, and we may not survive what we have seen. The hum of the manuscript grew louder, vibrating through the floor. The glowing symbols formed an image of a hand reaching toward one of the distant machines. The crew watched, mesmerized, feeling as if the image had entered their minds. Suddenly, one of the workers, Jalen, stepped forward. His eyes were bright, his movements precise. I will do it, he said, pointing toward the vision. I will reach it and prove we are worthy. Myra gasped. No, Jalen. You do not understand. You cannot step into what you cannot see. It is dangerous. Tomasz placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. The trial is not physical. It is of the mind. Those who fear cannot proceed. Those who trust and unite will find the way. With careful guidance, Tomasz and Myra helped the crew focus. One by one, they directed their thoughts toward the vision. The manuscript's glow intensified, connecting each mind in a shared understanding. Stars and machines formed in their thoughts, moving in perfect alignment. Myra closed her eyes, feeling herself pulled into the pattern. She saw herself and the crew walking among the ancient machines, understanding their purpose without words. The fear remained, but so did courage. Tomasz's presence was steady beside her, guiding her through the storm of visions. Hours passed, yet time felt like moments. When they finally opened their eyes, the manuscript rested quietly, its glow dimmed but steady. The crew sat together, exhausted but whole. The trial had not destroyed them. It had tested their ability to endure the knowledge of the ancients and to unite as one. Myra looked at Tomasz, her relief mixed with wonder. "We passed," she whispered. Tomasz nodded, eyes still fixed on the book. "We have only begun. But now we know we are strong enough to face what comes next. The manuscript has chosen to share its secrets. Humanity's legacy is not lost." The stars outside twinkled with a strange intensity, as if acknowledging the crew's success. The ancient machines remained still, waiting, yet somehow less distant than before. Myra finally allowed herself to breathe. They had survived the trial, and in doing so, they had proven they were ready to awaken the knowledge of a forgotten age. The stars stretched endlessly before the ship as it floated through the ancient system. The crew moved quietly, each lost in thought, carrying the weight of the trial they had just endured. The manuscript rested in the center of the ship, its glow now steady, calm, as if satisfied with their perseverance. Myra watched Tomasz as he studied the book. His eyes were bright with understanding, but she could see the exhaustion beneath his determination. "We have come far," she said softly. "But now comes the real choice. The book has shown us our past. It has tested us. But what we do next will shape our future." Tomasz nodded. "Yes. This is the moment the manuscript promised. We have seen the machines of our ancestors. We have felt their knowledge. Now we must decide if we are worthy to claim it." The crew gathered around the table. Some were hesitant, still shaken by the visions, while others were filled with awe and courage. They all understood that the next step was not optional. The manuscript demanded a decision. The final pages of the book began to glow brighter, revealing a passage written in shifting symbols. Tomasz read aloud slowly, feeling the meaning in his mind before the words even reached his tongue. "To claim the legacy of our ancestors, one must open the last passage with a voice united in courage and trust. Only then will humanity rise beyond its forgotten limits." Myra looked around at the crew. "This is what we must do together. No single person can carry this knowledge alone. The manuscript requires unity." Some crew members shivered in fear, but Tomasz's calm voice encouraged them. "Do not fear what you do not yet understand. The book is not a curse. It is a challenge. If we face it together, we will gain what humanity has long lost." One by one, the crew stepped forward. They placed their hands near the glowing pages, feeling the gentle hum of energy. Their minds connected as the book seemed to reach into each of them, weaving their thoughts into a single thread of focus and courage. Myra closed her eyes and felt the manuscript's power. She saw visions of humanity standing proud among the stars, of cities built on floating worlds, of ships that could travel vast distances in the blink of an eye. These were not just dreams. They were possibilities, waiting for those who were ready. The first words were spoken by Tomasz, but his voice joined with Myra and then with every crew member. They read the final passage aloud as one, their voices forming a harmonious rhythm. The symbols on the manuscript glowed, spreading light through the ship. Suddenly, a wave of energy filled the room. It was not harmful, but it carried the feeling of understanding, of knowledge flowing into their minds. They saw the rise and fall of the ancient empire, the battles, the inventions, and the wisdom left behind. And then they saw a path forward, a path humanity could follow if they were brave and united. Myra opened her eyes and smiled, tears filling her vision. The fear that had held her now seemed distant. They had faced the manuscript together, and none of them had been destroyed. Instead, they had been awakened. The glow of the manuscript softened. The energy in the room calmed, leaving behind a sense of clarity and purpose. The crew looked around at each other, no longer frightened, but proud. They had not only survived the trial, they had proven themselves worthy. Tomasz stepped back and placed the book carefully on the table. "It is done," he said softly. "The legacy of humanity is ours to claim. But with it comes responsibility. We have been given knowledge beyond our time, and we must use it wisely." Myra nodded. "We have seen the past and learned from it. Now we must guide our future. Humanity can rise, stronger than ever, if we remain united." Outside the ship, the stars seemed brighter. The ancient machines, still floating among the dead worlds, pulsed faintly as if acknowledging their success. The crew felt a new energy within them, a connection to a time long forgotten. They were no longer mere explorers, they were the inheritors of a legacy that had been waiting for someone to remember. In the following days, they began planning. The manuscript had provided guidance, maps, and knowledge that could rebuild civilizations. The crew worked together, learning to apply what they had seen in visions. They studied the symbols, repaired the ancient machines, and charted paths through the stars that had been hidden for centuries. Myra stood by the window, watching the glowing lights of distant worlds. Tomasz joined her, and for a moment, they were silent, feeling the weight of their achievement. "We did it," she whispered. Tomasz smiled. "No. We did not just survive. We awakened humanity. We proved that we are capable of more than we ever imagined." The manuscript rested safely in its chamber, no longer demanding, only waiting. It had given its challenge and passed judgment. Humanity had risen to meet it. And so, the crew sailed onward, carrying with them knowledge, courage, and hope. They were no longer merely travelers among the stars. They were the heirs of a forgotten empire, ready to shape the future of humanity for generations to come. The Book of Doom, once feared and hidden, had fulfilled its purpose. It had tested the hearts of humans, and in doing so, it had allowed them to rise. The stars were theirs to explore, and nothing could hold them back.